I don't know. I'm kind of looking this way. I might stick with that.
All right, and we are live, and we are back with episode 4 of Armchair Admirals and Generals, and I am Tree0311, as you can tell on the screen, and after logging onto my Twitch, here with my podcast partners below me to the left are um, sorry,
You can read
It's
our
okay.
names. They're written.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't mess this up this time.
no,
You have no excuse.
train of thought. Below to my left, I have Night Cobb. Night Cobb, tell
There
everybody
you
who
go.
you
Yeah.
are, what you do.
Hi, I'm Night Cobb. I'm a submariner, active duty Navy. Coming up on my 16-year anniversary, actually, in just a couple short weeks. And I basically come here to offer advice and military opinion on all things Star Citizen. I occasionally stream on Twitch, and every once in a while I put out a really crappy YouTube video of either Star Citizen or DCS. So come by and watch those if you get a chance. They're fun. I collaborate too with some other people with DCS videos and all that kind of stuff. So that's me.
Very cool.
Atira, your turn.
All right.
I'm eating my dinner while we talk.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, nice. Well, some people might like that. I am a Tirakel, and you can find me at YouTube/Tirakel, all one word. Put out all kinds of science fiction and fantasy-like videos or games, stuff like that. It's a good time. A soldier's opinion is the thing that kind of ties in mostly with this podcast. And the happy news is, of course, that EW went out before Christmas, so my long and elaborate video on electronic warfare is out, and it highlights
good video too.
All the failures and successes, some successes for Star Citizen, and where I think they need to take EW in the long run. But yeah.
Very good.
That's me. Oh, and I guess I'm in the Army 22 years, whatever. And
no big deal.
No big deal.
Just a few.
Yeah. And if you're new to the channel or watching this later and we haven't met, I am Tree0311. 0311 is my first MOS when I was a young Marine infantryman many years ago. And since then, I've been in the Army National Guard as a flight paramedic. So my background is in making things go boom and putting holes in bad guys, and then patching up the good guys afterwards. So that's what I do. I'm also a flight paramedic on the civilian side. So that's aviation, infantry type stuff, medicine. That's sort of my jam. And so if you're watching this later, the links to Night Cobb and Atira Kell's social media and their YouTube channels will be down in the description below. If you want to check them out, I highly encourage it. Please support our people. And we're going to just talk a little bit of housekeeping before we get started, because if you don't follow me on Twitter or you're don't check out the see the community posts on my YouTube, or you're not in my Discord, blah blah blah. I received my first payout from Twitch and donated that along with some of my own funds to match it up to $100 to stackup.org. And that is one of the reasons we do this podcast is, we enjoy talking about Star Citizen. We're all friends. We hang out and talk about Star Citizen on the side all the time. Atira and Night Cobb are in the same org, ammo. So if you're looking for a good org, hop in my Discord, reach out to them. They'll get you set up. But we're all veterans, and we want to support veterans, and gaming's a big part of our lives. And stackup.org supports veterans and active duty personnel by connecting them with video games and video game communities. Oh, my camera is showing my desk. We'll have to tilt that back up. So that's why I do everything I can to support. Okay, stackup.org. And
you look great.
Well, it's showing my desk, and that drives me nuts.
If you go a little bit higher, you can put the words right over your face.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
true.
didn't think about that beforehand. I need to adjust my camera or maybe zoom it in more or something. Anyway, but all that
There
is
weren't enough
the
crayons in that salad you were just eating, I'm pretty sure.
they're down at the bottom. I think we'll get to them with the croutons and. So yeah, everything I do on this channel is all monetization goes towards stackup.org. You can donate directly by clicking I think there's a little donate link thing on Twitch on the main screen. If you just by watching and suffering through the ads, that can helps go to stackup.org. If you choose to subscribe, that money will go to stackup.org. So all those things, and then my YouTube, we are at 780 followers. We're almost to 1,000, which is the threshold for monetization. So
Follow
please
tree.
please considering giving me a
Follow all
subscribe on YouTube. Yeah, follow all of us. Follow and
Just
subscribe. And
no,
of us.
it's
Shut
too.
up. You shut up.
It's yours. I
Where's
like
my
it's yours
camera?
videos.
You be
spread the
quiet.
love around.
Just don't
But,
follow me. How about that?
Please consider subscribing on YouTube and help me get over that threshold so we can continue to support stackup.org. I think it's a worthwhile cause. And
mental health is a real big issue for the military right now. So, please support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say that gaming and being a part of gaming communities is a huge factor in my continued good mental health. As good as that.
Not just you.
Yeah, and So let's get started. Tonight we are talking two topics, and there's sort of a yin and yang type thing because we're going to be talking about boarding actions and damage control in Star Citizen, and we're sort of going to frame this in kind of like a scenario light discussion. We're going to start with boarding actions from the sort of perspective of the potential boarders, and we'll go from there. And then once we get to the second part where we're talking about damage control, Atira and I are not as familiar with damage control as Nightcob is, because Nightcob is in the Navy. He works on a sub. Damage control parties are a huge part of what they do, and I've spent plenty of time on ship, but when they're doing the drills for that sort of stuff, it's more of all right, Marine, go lie in your bed and stay out of the way, and we'll come get you if the ship starts sinking, or if we need extra hands for some reason. So we had as we always do with the episodes, we sort of create like a resource document where we put a whole bunch of resources that we can find on the topics that we're going to be discussing, and we go through and we sort of ask questions that we want to sort of I guess you could say answer in regard to those topics. And the first in regards to boarding, starting us off, the first thing is we need to sort of discuss why are we boarding a ship? What purpose does boarding a ship in Star Citizen have? What is our end goal? And so I wanted to we'll cover a couple of different things, but for gameplay reasons, I wanted to ask each of you, what if it's you, what is your primary function for boarding a ship? And let's start with you, Nightcob. What is your if you're going to be doing boarding, why are you boarding someone else's ship?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about purpose, or you're talking about why I'm doing it,
your motivations.
My motivation is I mean, in the game, money and the experience. I mean, like I love the Merc style combat, so it's more along the lines of coming in to extract a target, extract information, take the ship. Maybe it's intelligence, intelligence gathering one day when like data running is a thing. Mm-hmm. And data running is like physicalized on a chip, a card, or something like that. Something that's sensitive that you can't rely on, like the eventuality of ship death, whether it's that soft death or whatever, to maintain whatever is inside the ship that you really want. and you want it intact and you want it in good condition, available to you after the contest.
Okay. Yeah. So you don't want to run the risk of destroying the ship and damaging whatever your target is, whether it's a bounty or sensitive information you're trying to recover, as part of a mercenary contract. Yeah, those are really good reasons to be boarding someone's ship versus we're just going to shoot it full of holes. And Atira Kel, as far as for you and your gameplay reasons, what sort why would you be interested in boarding someone's ship? What would be your motivations, your goals?
I should turn my mic back on so that you don't have to hear my coughing. Well, I think Nightcob hit on a good one. Intelligence. I think from a lawful org type perspective, if you're trying to track down pirates or whatever, drug runners, whatever you're trying to do, other players, it would be cool if there was a log, a black box you could pull,
Mm-hmm.
and then evaluate and see all their jumps, like their last 15 jumps or something.
Oh,
Right.
okay. I see
So
what you're
like,
saying.
and then you could pull that. You have to do the analysis and figure out, like, okay, well, I think maybe this is where they're based out of. And if you recall, right, they said that eventually we'll be able to drop beacons in space that we can then jump to, and they'll stay until they're destroyed. So we can have org focused or personal level beacons that we control the accesses to. So maybe that transponder data for that beacon is inside that flight plan. So now you could put together a strike team after boarding this ship and then go raid their base as well and go straight to it if you figure out which of those points is theirs. And then the one that I wrote in our notes is salvage, right? I mean,
Yeah.
My hope is that eventually CIG gets to the point where you pull components, you can then, and I don't know how they're going to let us do this, because you're really talking about transitioning a component, a physicalized component, into the inventory screen so that you can then put it on your ship, right? So I mean, if you think about it, you go in, you freaking take down some Perseus, Hammerhead, even something smaller, right? You pull all their components out. If they've upgraded their ship, you might now have a bunch of Class A military, Class A civilian, Class A stealth components that you can then turn around and sell or use to equip your org,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then transfer that stuff over and then equip it. So I think that's another fantastic thing. And of course, the piratey answer is cargo and all that stuff.
Cargo and you can think about, like, we have the 890 jump mission, and they're trying to capture high value targets. That goes both ways. But Atira, I like your idea. Yeah, and data. And you guys both kind of cover data, but in different ways. Whereas Nightcob, we're retrieving data for someone that says, hey, we want what's on this ship data wise. Whereas Atira Kel is looking at it, okay, there's data here that can progress us on a mission that we're already on. And that sort of makes me think about how the bounty missions for, like, the Arlington gang go up, 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 and up. You take down a lower level bounty, and you capture that bounty, but then you rifle through all their information that's stored on their ship in order to try and backtrack to get to the head of the organization, the bigger fish that you want to fry. And I think it's a really good reason to board someone's ship, because with the way, soft death for now. Uh-oh. Can you guys hear the kid screaming in the background?
Yeah, it's fine. Man.
Mom must be giving him vegetables that he does not like. But
oh yeah, that's quality.
Yeah,
but he hasn't acquired the taste for crayons yet. That's fine.
Not yet, and we have this huge supply, and we don't know what to do with them because I can't eat them all myself.
Yeah. Well, they come in like 94 in a box, 96 in a box.
Depending on how big of a box you get and what's available at Costco.
That's fair.
I don't know what she's doing to him.
Pension him.
I'm sure it's fine.
To go back to what you were saying, though, they've said, right, that you could have like an NPC nemesis or something, right, where you encounter the same NPC in an area over and over again, and that guy is talking smack to you, and if he disables you, and like I don't know, whatever, I don't know how that's gonna work, right? Because if he disables you, why would he not just like blow you away and end you if you're in a fight or something? But this idea of the nemesis, right? And then you might
Yeah.
there might be some for you individually as a character, as a player, if you hunt down that guy using like other members of his gang to track him down, him, her, then maybe there's some sweet loot there that's just for you as a player because that was like tagged as your nemesis. So there's just some loot there, right? That's like really cool. Like I loved it in the gosh, in the Crusader missions, the platform missions, right? You could loot the boss's armor.
Yeah.
And it was unique armor sets and stuff. I don't know, just something like that. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah,
Tree,
no,
I'm
those are.
surprised you didn't say rescue ops, by the way.
Oh, I haven't given mine yet.
No shit, did I? Man, sorry, jumped ahead.
But no,
Good
the,
job.
like, you know, from a largely lawful perspective,
good at
those
this,
are
I'm
really
sorry.
good. Those are really good reasons to, you know, board someone's ship. You know, whether it's, you know, you're retrieving data, you know, sort of bounty hunting, mercenary work. You know, you're rescuing somebody who's being held hostage. You know, because that's going to be a thing, folks. It already is in game. You know, you're using it to sort of, you know, get information to lead you on the trail to the ultimate goal. You know, the bigger fish you want to fry. You know, it could be like you're talking about. You know, you want to acquire something else that's on the ship. You know, the components. You know, you are doing it for, you know, whether it's lawful or not. You know, profitability. You know, you're okay. We've disabled this ship and we want to board it because if we just blow it up, you know, that's a whole bunch of money just thrown away. And maybe you scanned it and you're like, oh, I want that. That might be, you know, that juice might be worth the squeeze. And for me, for my gameplay, you know, and not to be too obvious, but you know, there's I think of sort of, you know, the Coast Guard who is flying out on their helicopters and stuff, and you know, lowering a rescue swimmer onto a ship, you know, that's in distress in order to get the crew off the ship, you know, before it capsizes. You know, we're, you know, whether that target ship was, you know, damaged in a firefight or, you know, some sort of environmental occurrence, you know, because we're going to have those things, you know, where you fly through an area and you get struck by space lightning or, you know, flying debris, you know, in a sort of it's not an atmosphere but a turbulent area of space where there's, you know, a lot going on. You know, if you think about the coil from the Squadron 42 vertical slice, there are lots of areas within Star Citizen that are very much like that, where, you know, without getting, you know, someone firing a shot, your ship could be severely damaged, you know, and left adrift in space, and maybe you don't have the means to get yourself underway, you know, and where you're, you know, sort of, you know, referencing to what Nightcob does, but your cooler, you know, isn't keeping up with power, and you're like, oh gosh, you know, if we shut down power, we're going to lose life support and we're going to die out here. But if we keep running the power plant, you know, we can't keep it cool, and you know, it's gonna you're responding to a rescue situation in order to get the people off, you know, and bring them home, or you're either rescuing the people from the ship, or maybe you are bringing what you need on board the ship, especially a larger ship, in order to get them underway again. But you know, the ship is damaged, you know, they've got, you know, minimal comms, you know, they don't have power, and you need to navigate through, you know, whatever this dangerous environment is in order to, you know, get on board the ship and maybe pry the door open, and they, you know, on the other side of the air, like, oh, thank goodness you're here, you know, please tell me you have a replacement this or that, you know, and you go on board and you help them get their, you know, ship functional again, you know, and then they, you know, you escort them back, you know, fly them back to safety. You know, those are scenarios that I could definitely see in Star Citizen. They're things that are talked about in lore. Obviously, my preferred is there are people on board who are injured and I want to go rescue them. But after that, it's like you're talking, Night Cobb. The idea of boarding.
So nice.
Yeah. The idea of boarding in order to take out a bounty target, or to, whether it's an actual bounty or, it's straight up mercenary work, of any stripe. That's the kind of, the mission isn't go blow up the ship. The mission is retrieve what's on the ship or bring this person in, bring them in warm. There's a bunch of different scenarios you could think of. So the next question, and it's sort of general, but I wanted to talk to you guys what your thoughts are on the challenges of boarding a ship in different states. And by states, the ship is, the target ship it's under power, it's underway. It might still have some teeth. Maybe it's minimized to somewhat, but it's not just dead in space. And then the flip side of that is the ship is disabled, and maybe it's either temporary or via like distortion weapons. And you have a short window to get on board and achieve the mission or further disable them, or you've inflicted severe permanent damage, kind of like the soft death. And so Atira, regarding those two sort of examples, disabled or under power and underway, what would be the challenges that you can think of off the top of your head regarding boarding in those sort of scenarios?
Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna pass. Night Cop. No, I'm kidding.
You don't get to pass.
No.
No. Well,
mandatory, sir. Mandatory.
Yeah.
Just
I'm not playing charades, man.
talking about no power, right? I mean, or loss of power. Challenges are going to be getting doors open, right? Getting airlocks open. So they it'll be interesting to see how they sort out the Legionnaire, right? So if you put a ship into a downed state, its power plant is not generating power to the ship, can the Legionnaire power locally that door to open it? Right? I don't think so, but maybe. They've already talked about they're having purpose-built breaching charge containers in the Legionnaire. So the idea would be just blow it open. Okay. Well, again, kind of getting after what you're talking about. If you're going to rescue someone, or if you are going to salvage, the best way to go into a ship is probably not with explosives. Like, hey, I'm here to rescue. Clack, clack, clack. And watch the C4 explode on the side of their ship and send it off into space as they.
Well, especially because you don't know the state of the interior of the ship. Maybe
it's still sealed. I don't know.
That airlock might not be closed. And so you blowing it, could you could risk decompression. That may be a good thing. That may not be. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think so. One of the things I had thought about was some type of jaws of life, right? Something that you can attach, and it could be magnetic, right? So you come up, pull this thing out, attach it. It then magnetically adheres and pulls the door apart, right? Or I don't know. Not all doors open that way, so maybe there's something you would have to do to one of the ones that swings out, because that's they have like crap tons of different doors, right? But
yeah, because it's not just getting through the first door. There's
it's getting through all the subsequent doors. Yeah. So the first door might open and swing out, and then there's another set of doors like this. Or I can't remember, is the Hammerhead, did the doors open with two small doors, or is it one big one? I don't remember. Anyway, I think some of them are larger. Anyway, the point is you gotta get through all these doors somehow, and I don't think breaching charges for every one is the right answer. So that's your first challenge, and then of course that just gets you into the ship. Now you're gonna have to EVA. You just decompressed part of the ship, so now you in theory need to close that. right? Because now
Yeah.
you got, in theory, especially if you're on a rescue mission, you don't know if everybody is compressed,
Yeah.
the rest of the ship is compressed or not. So now you got to close that so that you can repressurize the room you're in so that you don't kill everybody when you open the next door. You run into a lot of challenges there. So I think some type of Jaws of Life situation would be preferable for most situations, actually. The only time you would want to hard breach a door would be, if you're doing privateering operations and you don't care if the crew dies.
Hmm.
So you just blow that door because it's like, I mean, for me, it's a privateering. For a pirate, it's pirating. You don't care if they die per se. You just want to get into their ship, secure the ship, and then take everything associated with the ship. So that's breaching charges. That's going in hard. And then for everything else, though, it doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
And I get that
There's
you can
some
hack, but if there's no power,
Yeah.
then you can't hack, right?
yeah.
That's one thing
So
that when the Legionnaire came out, I was like, okay, the hacking's great if the ship is under power, but I assume that you will need you know whether because the ships are going to have batteries, and so you'll have some battery backup power. The question
but
is, is
is
that
that
enough to open
localized to that
doors?
region though? Because think
Exactly.
about it. They're
Yeah.
talking about, wow, I'm going to have all these
Your
breakers and
relays.
the
Yeah.
relays. And okay, well, so if the
Yeah.
relay to that section of the ships you're going in is blown out, then whatever battery backups, because those are not, well, I don't know. Nightcab, you could tell me, do you guys have batteries all over the damn ship that power different parts of the ship? Probably not. They're probably like in one centralized place, right?
Yeah, so there's a central emergency ship's battery. Now, all ships are built on a uh, system of how it deals with battle damage, what we call selective tripping. So basically, the components that are most likely to suffer, like the smaller components like doors and everything like that, are supposed to be like these relays. Like the idea is, okay, well, the relay should go first and it should trip first locally whenever there's damage local to the component supplied by that relay, and it should end there when the relay trips.
Hmm.
So if the door takes damage, relay trips, nothing powers that door, but all of the other doors still receive power is the idea. There's
To
also
me, it's
some,
almost like
some
stopping bleeding on somebody who's had like an amputation. You're putting a tourniquet on above, and everything below isn't going to function. Whether it was the original thing in the first place. Like you said, the door
yeah,
took
that's the idea.
damage. Yeah,
So
yeah.
somebody in the chat said that they showed a tool that pries open doors. I don't remember that. I remember the salvage tool. I
The
remember
well, it's one
there's
of
like a
the links,
rifle sized
and
things.
you have the cutting tools, and they had in
Right.
that video they talked about a breaching charge, but some of the other concepts don't look like a breaching charge. They look like something that would be almost like a pneumatic hydraulic type device that would pry the door open, but they didn't talk about that being one of the devices. They just showed it. And so I'm hoping, like you were talking about, we get things like that, because explosive might not be a good idea. They've got a lot of utility items in the work, but for me, for my purposes, if I'm rescuing somebody, I just want to pry the door open enough to get in there and get to them. Especially if I have the ability to maybe pry it open, get in there, and close it behind me. As part of a rescue, to maintain that integrity of the door, if possible. Whether that's
That assumes no hostility, though. Like you don't
yeah,
expect hostility because
yeah,
you make yourself vulnerable
oh
if
Yeah.
you're
yeah,
doing like a slow opening of a door and stuff like that. And
hmm,
hostile forces have had a chance to literally just set up with a light machine gun pointed at the small entryway. We see that with Jumptown, 2.0 in its
well,
current
that's what
state.
people do with
Prior to
the medical beacons right now
318.
all the time. It's
Yeah,
the whole
yeah.
you're baiting people.
And the way to get through, or a lot of people have done with and had some meager success, not without casualty, is when they cycle into the airlock and that door opens, they're tossing grenades. They already had grenades ready
Hmm.
because it's shock and awe. That's the best way to defend against, well, to really, I guess, attack against people that are encroached like that. And
I hope that
you know
armor is really good armor because
I think that's a realistic thing you're going to have to look at with boarding in a hostile environment. Outside of the, you bring up a lot of great points though, Atira, with the, if you don't know that everybody, especially if you're going in for a rescue or a high value target, you don't know that everybody's, rigged for vacuum. So if you breach and you decompress a space, then you potentially sacrifice your high value target. But you've got to know that, like, if you've given them any kind of time and or warning to defend against boarding, like
Mhm.
they're set up. If they're any kind of equipped, you've got like three people, two people crouched, two people standing, two people kneeling, from multiple directions, literally just pointed at the, one or two entrances that are viable to a ship if they have that kind of firepower available to them. And your first two guys in, are basically sacrificial pawns that you're hoping to be able to revive with a med gun after they toss a grenade and hopefully, you know, get them
Which is
to.
why I want to draw about a proper boarding ship that you can use by puncturing the hull at any point.
Yeah, like the Vandal use, and that I
Yeah,
mean that might
you
be a
you
thing
shouldn't
where
be
we can
you
do
shouldn't be
freeform
restricted.
cutting. Yeah,
I
because
mean,
they
free
have talked
form
about.
cutting would be fine. Yeah,
Mhm.
but you should not. They shouldn't restrict us on that to just those narrow passageways. To get into
Yeah,
the ship. If you plan ahead and you have a ship that can carry these pods, and when you take a ship down and you want to board it, there's no reason why you should have to dock,
hmm
right? Just slam into it. Punch through the hull, freaking opens up, everybody goes out.
Well, here's the good news, in my opinion, and kind of why I don't want. I mean, I'm okay with the system as is if they use it only hatches only. Even with the relatively small amount of hatches on most ships. That's how it is on a submarine. 3 hatches. That's all you get. There's no other way into the boat. Ultimately, though, what it depends on is how organized and how quick to react and how effective a defense, the ship can put up, the crew, I should say, of the ship being attacked can put up under duress. And, that's kind of like now you're entering into the sweaty, PvPers. If they're training that way, like, hey, armory's over here, we're
Mhm.
being boarded, and they could communicate effectively to set up, a good defense around those multiple entry points potentially. Because they ideally, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, third person camera being what it is, they're probably going to know exactly what hatch you're going to. And I don't think there's much we can do about that. But, the idea would be, real life scenario, they wouldn't know which hatch you're going to pick. So you
hmm
got to guard multiple and you got to coordinate that. But, knowing what they're going to know, they still have to make sure everybody's armed in the right position and ready to go. So really the key thing is being effective and quick with your boarding action because you're trying to breach, get in, get what you need, and hopefully stop them from getting set up.
yeah. Well,
So
and
that's your best bet.
yeah, you talked about grenades, and that brings up a challenge I don't think a lot of people have considered is the with Star Citizen and what CIG is doing with the room system. If your ship is still has some power or you have the ability to do it and you're getting boarded, the defenders can remove the atmosphere in the ship, particularly in the areas where they're expecting to be boarded. If there's no atmosphere, you have to have an atmosphere to really have the concussive force of an explosion. If
True.
there's no atmosphere, you don't have any transmission of sound.
Wow, there are
And
plenty of devices you could have that don't require
oh yeah, I'm just saying like the
oxygen to
traditional
create a boom.
concussion grenade or a flashbang um, is going to have limited effect because of the lack of an atmosphere. If they're able to do that, and your one of the major ways in which you take damage from a grenade isn't just the shrapnel of a frag grenade isn't just the shrapnel, but the shockwave passing through your body. If there's no shockwave, you're or very minimal shockwave because there's no atmosphere for it to travel through. Your your ability to do that sort of thing. Like for me, I'm thinking sort of a stun grenade, but not in like the uh, like a popper, but it's more stun in like the electric weapons we have. I forget what they call them, but it arcs out electricity like a taser, out, in an area around it in order to, um, maybe you can't take everybody down, but you can disrupt them enough in order to slow down their reactions and their responses to you. And where are we? So with the state of the ship, if they're disabled, everybody's like, oh, if they're disabled, I'll just be able to dock my ship to them, or pull up next to them in EVA and then cut my way in, hack my way in, or whatever. But they already have it in game, to some extent, and it's going to continue. Even if you're disabled, you maintain some momentum. And if you disable a ship and they are in a roll, part of the crew, part of the ship.
Yeah. That was my mantra on my last boat, because I was there for a really long time. I got outlasted all but 5 other sailors and a crew of like 150.
Mm-hmm.
People kept coming on board.
Thank you for the follow. We appreciate you. Thanks for coming and hanging out. But those are the things where it's like, okay, you want to dock with a ship, and you have to. There was a really great video that somebody did where they sort of mimicked the what was that space movie, where like
That's
the
helpful.
ship is the ship is falling and they're trying to dock with it, and then it's like falling and spinning into the atmosphere. They recreated that with the sound and everything. It was an amazing video, but they did it with
Talking about Supernova?
No,
Is that Supernova with James? Oh my God, one of the Brat Pack, James Spader.
No, it was a more recent movie. It was a very dramatic part of the movie where the ship, or maybe it was
Interstellar.
Interstellar. There you go. That scene. Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Ghost. Somebody actually did that in Star Citizen with a Pisces, trying to land it as the Carrack is falling, through gravity towards the planet, and it's spinning. Okay, well, that really makes it very challenging for whatever ship you're using to try and dock, because we do have one of the big things for the Legionnaires. It does have a ubiquitous docking collar. It's meant to be able to dock to the large capital class docking collars as well as the smaller ones. And that docking collar also has things within it. As it expands, there's cover that can like pop up, so you can use that in order to fight your way onto the ship you're docking with. But there's going to be, we have all the other ships with docking collars. The Cuddy Blue and Cuddy Red, the Carrack has them. The Constellation. All these ships have docking collars, and eventually, you're going to be able to, have some sort of, telescoping thing that goes from one ship to another. It's not just going to be the Legionnaire. The Legionnaire is just more versatile. But if the ship that you're trying to dock with is still moving, whether it's going in a straight line or it's in some sort of roll because they're doing evasive maneuvers, when they lost power, if it continues with that presents a very challenging scenario for boarding, for just even getting connected, regardless of how you're going to make your way in. And that's, it brings me back to the sort of Coast Guard idea of they're trying to either, or, even on like Navy ships, with helicopters trying to land on a flight deck in, heavy sea states, and the flight deck is moving like this, and you're trying to land a helicopter. Or if the ship is rolling over waves like that, and you're trying to lower a person onto the deck and not have them just get absolutely smacked in the side of the head by the ship itself. That's super, super challenging.
Can confirm, seen a lot of small boat transfers, even recently, almost go awry thanks to a rogue wave.
Yep. Yeah, that stuff happens now. And
does the Legionnaire not have a tractor?
There's no tractor beam on the Legionnaire. And so that's something that you have to consider. Do you have to bring an SRV in order to arrest their what would be the flight terminology? Their flight, their movement, in order to safely dock them? Or do you have a rock solid pilot who can manage to do that? So that's the sort of thing that, for me, as someone who is hoisted in and out of helicopters on a very regular basis. I do it onto the ground, and sometimes the ground has a slope, or there's things on the ground that might get in the way, but the ground isn't moving, and so that's an insane challenge for me when I see those videos, especially of the Coast Guard, but Navy pilots as well. That's just nuts, and it's a similar thing in Star Citizen. But so they're even though they're disabled, you might still have that challenge, and if they're still under power, how do you that's going to be really tricky in order to dock with somebody who's still moving and still fighting you. And I don't think that the concept art within the Legionnaire, with the Legionnaire trying to pull up alongside of an Idris, I don't think that was by accident. I think they gave them an idea because they have an idea of what might be occurring, and there's going to there's probably methods where you can either blind the ship so they don't know that you're coming up on them. It also goes back to an interesting part of the hacking conversation with the Legionnaire is when they talked about hacking gameplay with the gameplay design teams. They talked about being able to hack a ship. It would be really challenging in order to disrupt components and systems within the ship. Whereas John Crew is just the ship guy. He said that the Legionnaire would only be able to hack the or the docking permissions. And so there's a sort of disconnect between the two teams as to what hacking will entail and what the capabilities will be. And I think hacking is a really along with being very maybe diligent in your disabling of a ship in order to almost bring it to a crawl before you board it. As far as disabling thrusters, I think that's
better use of the
tactic.
SRP.
Yeah, that's going to be a tactic.
Or you got to have, or you actually have a good grief, a cutlass on hand that can slow the roll.
Yeah, it might just take longer with a smaller tractor beam, that sort of thing, because EVAing over to a ship that's moving, especially if it's in a spin, trying to, that's pretty scary to me, from a medic standpoint. But it's also a challenge, a scenario in game that I'm like, that's super cool. No one's ever done that, and we have the ingredients to have those sorts of things occur. Where you have to plan that out.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So I just looked at the Inside Star Citizen weapon of choice. That's what I've been doing over here quietly. That talked about all the FPS tools that they were talking about, the two-handers,
deployables and stuff, and
yeah.
And they don't.
Breach and charge, all that.
They have the crossbow. They got the breach charge. They got the cutting tool, and they got the tractor beam. And then they talk about the handheld pistol-sized med gun, and then the medical attachment for the multi-tool. I don't see anything specific to this, and this was the only time I remember them really talking about additional tools. So
it's the concept art that they have for different ones, where it's like, okay, this one looks different than that one for like the door type.
Sure, but
but they don't specifically mention it, and that's the issue. Is like, okay, not confirmed.
Yeah. So some of them look like they could have things that pull stuff apart, but but it's just a list with numbers next to them. It's just like a series of concepts. So
yep.
Anyway,
and we talked about how you get aboard. You're either you can be docking with an airlock. You can potentially puncturing the hull. Whether it's via the Vandal have boarding spikes, and I think potentially we could end up having something like that on the human side of the game, as well, like Atiria you were talking about, as well as potentially freeform cutting to cut your way into the ship, because I think that would be a really good way to get to where you want to go, rather than having to fight your way through the ship. You cut your way directly into engineering. I think it's a good possibility. We talked about EVA. And then there's always the option that is mentioned specifically in the lore for the Terrapin, how it's used to stealthily sneak up on larger ships and basically land in the hangar. And that's something, on an Idris, if the doors are open,
Yeah.
who knows what the potential
We
will
only
be
have
for
one ship that's really going to work on, though, and that's the Idris.
for now.
I mean, for now, sure.
Yeah.
So if you want to like try and go after a Bengal that's active,
Mhm.
knock
a
yourself
Kraken
out, enjoy
trying to insert your people onto the flight deck and then have them
onto the
fight their
flight
way
deck.
down into it. Yeah.
But I mean,
That's the perfect idea.
I think trying to drop people on a flight deck, you'd be better off with the Valkyrie than you would a Terrapin.
I think so too. Yeah,
I
Valkyrie.
mean, you got a bigger exit,
Yeah.
bigger exit point. You could
Or
potentially
a steel.
Shut up. Gosh, no. I liked the idea of the UH-1. I liked the idea of it, and then
Oh, you just didn't like the execution.
I just didn't. No, the execution was fine. I didn't like the price. That's
yeah.
that was the only thing that turned me off of that.
Just buy it in game, kids. Just buy it in
Yeah.
game.
Buy it in game.
They didn't want you to. They didn't want you to spend real money on it. Maybe that's just their way of telling you that.
But yeah, I think if you're going on a Kraken, it'd be better to. I mean, I guess in theory you could try and sneak in on an 890. I guess it depends really on how they adjust large ship hangar doors for that mission with the Terrapin. So like, of course, you'd have to be a pretty big dumbass if you're sitting there flying your 890 jump and you see a Terrapin tootle a little down and then sneak into your.
It makes
your
you wonder
hangar
what
bay
they're
that's
going
right
to
in
do
front of you.
with stealth.
Man, did you close
because
the hangar? Man, did you?
No, did you? No, I could swear I just saw
Where's-
something go in the hangar.
Where's the
But see,
garage
that's
door
a-
remote?
that's
Has
a
anyone
picture
seen
for
it?
hacking, though.
But you know what I'm saying? There's
Yeah.
not a lot of ships that would work on. You got they did show the two larger capital ships plus the Bengal, right? That's a yes. The Idris, yeah, sure. Now, if you can, if through the use of your data spike missiles, right, that they claim that they're going to give us one day, you could then override hangar doors.
Yeah.
That's
Use-
something that
you
I was
know,
thinking
you-
about
you know-
with hacking, because you could use a Legionnaire. If hacking is what the gameplay teams think it's going to be, what they
No,
are
but
intending for.
I think the Legionnaire has to be in contact. The idea with a data spike missile is that it basically
No, I
strikes
think
the hull.
the
and
Legionnaire
embeds, and then-
is remote.
You
Just
think it
based off-
is?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the Q&A again, but if you could do that to hack a door open, maybe it's the hangar door, and then you fly the Legionnaire right into the hangar and everybody disembarks and starts shooting, or maybe you get into the hangar and
Also,
you
a
have-
really small debarkation point for the Legionnaire, though.
yeah. And
So
you know,
if you're gonna do that, send in somebody larger with a bigger door to let more people out simultaneously. Then
have them
Yeah.
follow
You're
you.
gonna. I'm telling you, it's the reality is going to be the first few people are going to go down, and you're going to have to accept that the next three people are going to have to kill whatever's in the hallway that was prepared for you, and then revive the three people that are incapacitated,
unless they're
who hopefully
truly
are fully dead.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, because that's one thing that I think a lot of people have missed is the lore surrounding the Terrapin and the what's the Asperia one?
Prowler.
The Prowler.
Yeah.
I always forget about the
Prowler's
Prowler.
the Prowler's too big. That's a big
Mhm.
ship.
It is.
That's
and
I mean,
the
it's not
Prowler-
a Valkyrie.
The
Huh?
Prowler is
It's
a
a
drop
Valkyrie.
ship, but it's also in lore. It's
True,
meant to
yeah.
be a boarding ship where those things on the side allow it to essentially gravitate to the hull of the ship
Yeah.
and then
okay.
glide along it, and then the borders are hop out EVA, the magnetic boot onto the side of the ship or whatever. But that's how the Tavaran boarded capital ships during the Tavaran Wars, is they would sneak up on them, or maybe the other thing you can think about is the way they've talked about with radar and sensing, and you have all this clutter during a battle. If your ship can close with a larger ship during a
Only
battle,
if they do EW the way I tell them to.
yeah, it could be you could use the detritus, the flotsam and jetsam of destroyed and damaged ships, in order to cover your approach, I could see that, especially with a large fleet battle, whether that's something that occurs in the PU or not, I don't know. But, the fact that there's been multiple instances within the lore of them talking about, stealthily boarding a capital ship, both by the UEE and by the Tavaran with ships that we have right now. It makes you wonder what their plans are for stealth and for being able to, overcome those sorts of things. Because right now, there's no way, Oh,
Did you mean your stream to say continuing the saga of Conrad Centurion Star Sector?
whoops, I did not. That's why. See, I forgot to change it. Son of a biscuit.
I know. I just saw Drew's post and I was like, I need to look at the. Oh, yep. No. No.
I always forget that. There should be a reminder.
That's okay. I
Thank
do that
you.
too.
However, dry.
We play in DCS and people be like, this doesn't look anything like Star Citizen. And I'll be like, damn it.
Shut up,
You're
man.
right. I'm flying the Apache today. I don't know what to tell you.
Star Citizen's got helicopters in space. What do you want?
318's not live. I don't know what you want from me. It's wishful thinking.
Gosh, I need 318 to come out. I have the PTU downloaded, but I kind of want to experience it in live.
Amen.
And but
I wonder if that updates live or if other people see it.
Yeah.
See, we probably would have more people watching if I had changed it, but I'm a damn fool and forgot about it.
No,
I forget that.
It doesn't do it live, but if you refresh the page, it does.
Yeah, it's okay.
Lame.
Yeah.
Oh, it did. See, Drew,
Yeah.
said it did.
Thanks for looking out. However you say your name. Sorry, I have no idea how to say that.
I'm glad
Just
it's not just me that looks at that
Churro?
and just struggles immediately.
He says he everybody says it differently, and he enjoys hearing people struggle. It's fine.
I definitely hope we get ballistic shields for personnel, and I know that that's something that comes with the docking collar of the Legionnaire, but being able to have ones that are deployable, because they had those way back when Ilphonic was working on Star Marine.
You're basically talking about BF 2042 with the dude who can pull out the ballistic shield and just run at you as you empty your magazine into a shield.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's basically that as a breaching technique would not go amiss, right?
No, we're not.
So, I mean, that would certainly allow you to at least get out of the fatal funnel enough to begin a firefight versus just dying Normandy Beach style as they just gun you down inside your ship. So
yeah, you send the guys in with heavy armor first, and a breaching shield. The guy behind them, hand on the back and leaning around the side to fire like a submachine gun.
Yep. That's what you're gonna need. I feel like, or something. You're gonna have to defeat that funnel thing. Otherwise, people are never gonna bother to board. And like I said, you might have a chance.
Thing.
Would you call it the fatal funnel?
The fatal
Is that
funnel.
a term?
Yes, it is.
Is that a term?
It is.
That's a real. That's a real thing.
I was relying on you. I'm relying.
He's like the funnel thing
Today.
Icop's like, hey, can we get to the damage control already? You people with your
I wanna talk
funnels
about boarding.
and your measuring cups.
I just look. I told you guys. I was like, you guys are more combat oriented than me. Please, I'm going to rely on you for the boarding action stuff. I can tell you how it looks like from the inside. I mean, a little bit because we train that way. And ultimately, though, I know what it looks like. And when you got 3 hatches that are at best a meter wide, and those are your only 3 entry points, and I've got a few weapons lockers, a couple with light machine guns. I've got shotguns, pistols, that I can arm easily 6 to 7 people strategically near one of these access points to just, shatter whoever walks in first.
Yeah,
unless they've got things like, right. Unless they've got things like grenades and, some kind of means to protect themselves on that initial entry. And that's why I say like shock and awe is probably the best tool,
Well,
and
this
it's
gets
really
back to roles of the boarding team, right? So let's use the tools that we've already talked about. If you have, for instance, if you're boarding,
that's actually a good question that we did add in there, and this can be our sort of last
roles
one before we move
of
to
the boarders
damage control. Yeah, the the roles within your boarding team.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, you come into Corsair, you've got the room, right? They may or may not decide to defend there, but then once you break out of that room where the airlock is, you have a left and a right in that little central corridor.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have at least 2 guys with shields that are going to break off, right, and just start basically blocking as you advance, right, and sucking up fire. So
And they have to have good timing.
And they have to, well, right. So you're going to have to count that down. You're going to have to do all of the things. There's some videos out there of milsim guys who do a really good job of this stuff. But then you have to, everybody in the stack, right? The 4-man, 5-man, 6-man stack that's boarding has to know exactly what they're doing. So, you could either clear up one way and just completely cordon off another, the rear of the cargo bay of the ship, right? And clear forward through the crew areas, which is probably where they're defending. Or you could, split depending on the size of your team and clear both at the same time. But you would have to have people who are, specifically door breachers, people who are specifically earmarked as medics, people who are specifically earmarked to be, the first guy through the door. And to be perfectly honest, it's not necessarily about this is going to be your only job the entire time we're in the mission, right? Because if the first guy through the door goes down, the second guy is now the first guy. So you have to know everybody's job reasonably well so that at a minimum you can now pick up where you've left off, right? So, there's a lot of positions. I mean, you can go through all kinds of infantry handbooks and look up all the various additional duties that individual soldiers have, from medic to grenadiers to crew serve to ammo bearers to prisoner guys, right? So like if you take prisoners, specific guys who are designated to come forward and hold prisoners. I don't know that we're going to get a lot of that in Star Citizen, but
you got the whole restraining people thing coming. I'm curious how that works. But
that's the other thing I think about is you have your I don't want to use the word hard, but your hard members of the boarding team, the team that is the people who are focused on combat, if that's the aim. But then, you, like you said, you talked about the medic, you don't put your medic at 1 and 2 in the stack. They are protected. They're towards the rear. That's why I'm a medic, because I'm smart. But you want those guys, behind the main advance in order to, they might, the medic and someone else might secure a junction in passageways within a ship as the rest of the team advances, and then they move up, as the next portion of the ship is cleared, in order to keep up with them. But the other sort of soft members within that team, you might have somebody who is an engineering specialist, who is going to,
he's just pulling out
well, they could be looking
uses
for
as he goes relays. He's ripping out relays as they go.
Well,
Just
they might be
shutting the
looking
ship
for an
down.
engineering console in order to
idea though. Like it's really not. Because if it's one of those things, like if you've got the ship disabled from like a distortion standpoint, talk about an advantage you bring to the table and a way to extend your 5 minutes, the way they have it now, where it's like you're down for 5 minutes and it's like, well, we got one guy at the back of the, team who is literally going to start taking down relays until he gets to the major power plant. But ultimately what you've done is cripple the ship and ensure that it can't get away. And maybe the priority is exactly that. It's like, hey, we want this long term. We don't have enough time within that 5 minutes to accomplish all of our objectives. So the goal is we are breaching and we're heading straight for engineering and taking every fuse that we can on the way to prevent them from undocking and escaping. And then ultimately the goal is to disable their power plant. And then we move from there.
Yeah. Because if your engineer can, get a hold of an engineering console in order to, give your fighting team an advantage by opening and closing doors, maybe restoring gravity to an area, either to give your guys an advantage or the defending team a disadvantage. That's a piece of the gameplay that I think is really vital, and you want to protect that guy. so that way you can have that that tactical advantage as you're going through the boarding process on a larger ship. And
Oh man, imagine the gameplay associated with bringing an engineer, by the way, that knows exactly which relays need to come out first in order to like sequentially. Yeah, but I mean, like, imagine there's probably a strategy to like minimize time.
Yeah.
To get to the point where it's like, okay, these disable the turrets on this side of the ship. These won't be coming back
true.
up. Like
Yeah.
I love the idea of the engineer in the back leading the team, like right, next left, and he's just pulling relays as they go, and knows exactly how to take down a hammerhead, in quick order.
So it is interesting. So one of the dudes said that he thinks it'll be frag spam when you board. It depends on how they manage grenades inside a ship, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how far they'll push. What do they call it? I want to say damage matrix, but I'm not sure that's the right term. But
well, you know what my fear is short term? Have you guys seen videos of people throwing like a Pico or some small innocuous device inside of a ship?
And then
like
it just beeping
inside of it, and they throw it against a wall, and it starts ping-ponging around so much, and then all of a sudden the ship explodes.
Well,
like it literally does that much damage internally. And don't be wrong, that's like a bug. But it's one of those things is like they haven't worked out like how to deal with internal damage for the most part.
Well, so that goes all the way back to that old bug in the 2 point whatever days when you would get in and your pistol would vibrate on your hip.
Yeah,
and it would be bouncing against the cockpit's interior, and then you would just explode because it was doing one tick of damage every time it vibrated. And so I think if grenades are I think grenades are probably not the thing that CIG envisions you clearing a ship with. Maybe again, go back to the Corsair, if they're just holding down the chow area where the crew quarters are, and that's where they're, you might pop a couple grenades in there, and let that be it. But that's going to be a calculated decision, because if you think about it, you're just putting more holes in the hull, you're doing more damage, you're lowering the value of the ship if you're a pirate, you're lowering the value of the ship if you're a privateer who wants to sell that. You're
potentially killing your target, whether it's a bounty or someone you're rescuing.
You could be killing your target or somebody you're rescuing. I don't know how much. I think it just depends on the situation whether or not spamming grenades. And then again, they've said like eventually if the ship takes enough damage, it will explode.
Yeah, that's what I'd worry
you
about.
Disable it. So I mean, you pitch a grenade in the wrong place, like the engine room or something like that.
Yeah.
You might just blow the ship right there, and then everybody inside is just kind of sad on that.
You throw a grenade and you start a fire. And you throw a grenade, you start a fire in a room that you're trying to advance into. They back up out of that room. That room's on fire, and you
gosh, that would be so sick, though. Come on.
Yeah.
I have
the room's on fire. You just back away and make the existing crew deal with that fire, and you just wait for them.
So there's and I don't want to say famous, but it is famous. There's a famous picture of my old platoon during the Battle of the Joff in 2004 of a bunch of our guys running through a room of a burning building, and it's on fire because we threw grenades into that building in order to make entry, and we're trying to get into that building to capture high value targets to get intel, like you guys were talking about. Not only are we trying to capture high value targets, we're trying to get intel about where more high value targets are. But everything caught on fire. They had all sorts of like blankets because they were living in there, and it all caught on fire. And we're trying to fight our way through a room that is in flames, charged with smoke, in order to get to the second floor where they were still putting up a fight. And so that's we know fire propagation is going to be a thing in game, and if you don't have an engineer who can vent the atmosphere of that room that you're trying to make your way through, that fire could be, cause you some real problems, slow down your boarding action, your mission. It could cause problems for the people that you're attacking, as well, but also it's a double-edged sword.
Indeed. I agree. What's 9? So we need to shift targets.
Oh, yep. We were just
I
about to get
told
to
you you were
this.
bad at this. I told you you were bad at this.
No,
I'll
no,
try and keep
Seven,
us on track.
7 minutes
was-
behind.
I was about to transition us, but then we started talking about that last bit, and
Fun
so
stuff.
we're
Yeah.
hanging out right
no.
at about an hour for this segment. But now we're going to transition into the second part of the discussion, where we're going to be talking about damage control, because your boarding team, the boarders in this scenario, maybe you're on an Idris or a Javelin, and you have been boarded during a battle, and you have repelled the boarders, but they've caused all sorts of havoc and chaos on your ship, and you're trying to get your ship back into the fight, because the fight isn't over. And so what we're thinking is that Tira and I would go down, and we would sort of instead of me asking these two questions, we would ask Nightcob questions about how damage control might theoretically, especially from a thinking about it strategically, and how you might go about doing damage control on your ship in order to get minimize the damage, minimize injuries, and get back underway, get in the fight. And so the first question is, Nightcob, what if you're in this hypothetical scenario on a larger ship? What are your what would be the priorities for damage control on board your ship after you've been boarded? You've taken a bunch of damage and such, in the fight.
So number one priority on a ship, especially a submarine with the limited atmosphere and the hostile environment immediately outside. So there's really essentially no safe place to go, is fire. Above all others, if you have multiple casualties occurring with regards to the ship, fire is paramount. Fire is going to be the most likely thing to kill you. It's going to eat all your atmosphere. It's going to burn critical components. And it's going to rapidly fill a space with smoke and obstruct vision and basically prevent any further casualty response. Because the moment you start losing the ability to see, you really start losing the ability to fight. So fire wins above all others for the most part.
An RPG standpoint, I like to think of the fire damage that CIG has shown us as sort of like you have inflicted bleeding, you're going to continue to bleed until you do something about it.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about fire is, like, if you want to continue with that analogy, like, it's slightly different in that, if I just give you a cut on your arm, a small cut on your arm, that doesn't immediately transition to a life-threatening injury, whereas fire propagates so quickly that it only takes minutes before you've lost the ship and you've lost the space. Or lost the space and then lost the ship, excuse me, other way around. But I mean, that's all it takes.
And Star Citizen medical injuries aren't necessarily as critical either.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you could take a gunshot and just be like, med pen. Okay, fight the fire.
Yeah. Well, we're all hoping that one day Tree gets a little more in-depth gameplay for the medical stuff.
It's going to be a thing.
Yes, I agree with you.
I'm going to do a video for it.
Yeah.
So you have 6 different drugs you can give us.
Yeah. What more do you want, Tree?
My sweet summer child. 6 different drugs. You know who has 6 different drugs? An emergency medical responder, like the very basic, most absolute basic person, doing first aid.
Like Tree's not gonna be happy till he's intubating people. Okay.
Yeah.
Like
you don't want to see every capability that I have. But there's
the problem is
tangent. Ways to game.
Yeah. Sorry. I just don't want you devolving to the point where you're handing out foot fungus cream to the standard crew on a ship, like we see in regular.
Checking your hydration status. Everybody head to the bathroom. We're gonna watch you pee. Make sure you're peeing clear.
Oh boy, you're gonna
sounds
be
like a Marine thing.
I was gonna say, oh, yeah,
yes, it's definitely a Marine thing.
He'll be handing out moleskin for our worn out feet, though.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so fire, you say, is the number one. I would assume then, based on our notes, although I don't know who put this together, hull integrity is your second most problematic issue, especially for something like a submarine.
Yes, and that would be the thing that competes with fire. So for us, right? Obviously, it's flooding. would be the largest concern there in
Which gets rid
relatable
of the
terms.
fire.
It also causes fires. So here's the truth of flooding. I mean, bottom line is all seawater penetrations into a hull have flood control actuation valves that are all linked to control stations that you can shut, and it immediately shuts all access points for the seawater into the ship. The problem is, though, like you said, once the water's into the ship, water and electrical components really don't work all that well together, and it has a tendency to cause fires. Now you may have solved the immediate problem of the flooding, but now you also have a fire to deal with. So I could see it being a similar thing in a space-like environment, with things like boarding actions, breachings, explosive decompression, battle damage. Maybe you've solved the problem of the hull breach, but you have a lot of now secondary problems. Now that you're not venting atmosphere and you have oxygen for the fire to eat, potentially, depending on the space and the nature of the damage, now you've got to deal with secondary fires.
Yeah, I think this goes back. It's interesting. This goes back to the moment you enter into a potential risky situation. Everybody should have a vac suit and helmet on.
I'm telling you, man, we're gonna be treating this game like The Expanse. It's the smartest play,
right? And that doesn't mean that you're always doing it, because one of my org mates, Salty, he loves to freaking walk around his ship in civilian clothes and look at me.
And that's great if you're not going into combat.
Right. Well, he's living on the edge because it's Star Citizen. I mean, you could just die. But yeah, so you could, in theory, to get rid of fire, in theory. Not all fire, but I think most fire that we would encounter, right, is just vent the room.
Yeah. The moment you take you take the fuel, you either take, there's the fire tetrahedron. No, there's Ghost Dog, guys. The fire tetrahedron, right? Like, yeah, right. she might show up later. You've got, oxygen. You need oxygen for fire to burn. You need a fuel, so a combustible substance, or whether it's hydraulic fluid or whatever, something with a flash point. And then in some cases, yes, you can replace with certain metals, magnesium, flares, and ammo, and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, she's upset about somebody walking by. And all
she's like, "What's on fire? So, there's a fire?"
Yeah, I know, right? And then there's the chemical reaction itself of these components. So if you take one out of the chain, then you can keep fire from being a thing. Ideally, that would be easy.
I'm only one responsible one here. All my whole family's in bed. And we got Ghost Dog and a baby and all kinds of stuff.
I know. I'll deal with her in a second. I'll see if I can get her in a minute. She wants, the problem is she's like, I want to be on the screen, and stuff like that. But there she's calmed down. There we go. She calmed down. Anyway, so that'd be the idea. The easiest thing to do is set yourself up. She's killing me. Set yourself up for vacuum. And then if you're in vacuum, then you don't have to worry about fire starting, or at least you very much reduce the risk.
Yeah.
All right. Excuse me for just a second. Y'all continue. I will catch up in just a second.
When he brings up, I was a firefighter for years after getting out of the Marines, before I just went full medicine. But he brings up a point where, and the question is, how granular does CIG get with fire? Because there can be electrical fires that will burn without oxygen.
Oxygen, yeah.
And certain material.
I mean, you throw a white phosphorus grenade. I don't think white phosphorus needs oxygen either.
Nope.
And those are handhelds that you can throw. I've thrown them. They're fun.
Oh gosh, I can't. Throwing Willie Pete grenade into a room.
I ran really. It was not into a room, but I ran.
Oh,
really
there's
fast.
Ghost Dog. Hi, Ghost Dog. Yeah, no, that's a war crime right there. Throwing Willie Pete into an occupied room.
No, I don't think it is. But whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't an occupied room. Anyway, but yeah, no, I think they're gonna have, at least in the first release, you'll have to have some type of airflow, pressurization. But what I would like to see is, with the release of fire, is the ability to have a panel where you can go in and shut off your airflow, right, and then vent the ship.
Yep.
And maybe
and-
not every ship can do that, but
Well, and
Right,
it isn't
'cause
going to be
not
like a flip of a switch too. It's like, okay, we're going to initiate this process, but the life support is a system. And so imagine if your life support component is damaged. Does that make it so not only can you not restore, atmosphere to a room, but you also can't vent the atmosphere from a room? Are you up a creek without a paddle at that point? That's something that, if you haven't been boarded, you're in the fight, you're Night Cobb the engineer, even though you don't want to be the engineer, but you are Night Cobb the engineer, and you have taken damage during the fight, and maybe you've prepared for combat. You vented your ship already. Well, you lose your life support component. You can't restore that, and your suits are going to have limited oxygen capacity. You can only survive in that suit, for a limited amount of time, and obviously. Ghost, that was perfectly timed. Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
But that's something, a really interesting consideration, along with the whole integrity part is, you have, sweet, you've lost hull integrity, the atmosphere, or you pumped out your atmosphere in the first place. You can pump fix the holes in your ship, but now you're running on stored air, and you're like, okay, how quickly can we get the system back up and running?
Well, right now we have like an hour of air though.
Yeah.
Unless they're gonna drastically reduce that, which I don't think they are.
Oh,
did you notice that it goes down faster when you're injured though?
Yeah, I guarantee you
I didn't.
that will scale, and it will be
like
based off of
and stuff
it'll
like
be based
that.
off of your suit. Because if you
Sure, that makes sense that certain suits would be better than others, but but don't equip shitty suits in your ship.
Mm-hmm. But that's a
goes down
cost
to like
benefit.
preparedness though.
Yeah,
cost benefit
comes down to the planning. But flight suits are expendable, right?
If you're fighting a boarding action, and okay, now you can't, you have a limited air supply, as part of that suit because it's meant for combat and not meant for EVA and working in vacuum. Those are choices.
I would argue that's a flawed argument because combat is one of the most long and grueling things you'll ever get involved in on the ground.
Well, I'm aware.
You wouldn't you would have the most oxygen available, right, in a given suit. Maybe not for like EVA repairs, that might like an industrial suit, but I mean, I think of the suits available, it would be like an industrial suit and then a military suit.
Yeah,
right. So
I think that they are going to make you make those decisions. And
sure, and maybe an industrial suit you can't put certain armors on over it or something like that, and that's fine. But I mean, plus we already got oxypens, so you just have to carry oxypens and continue to inject yourself with air.
And that's preparedness, though. If you don't have those resources available, I mean, I don't know about you guys. How often do you have an oxypen on you?
Well, and
never.
You can only carry so many.
Exactly.
And it's an oxygen pen, not an air pen.
Yeah, so. I know. We get it, Tree. Look, man, you're just like they're using beams for oxygen.
70 whatever percent nitrogen, whatever percent oxygen.
Yeah.
It's an air pen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an air pen. Yeah, it's not going to give you an embolism. This is a special one. You just put it right in your vein.
I would even imagine that it's not even something to be injected into you. It goes into your suit.
Yeah.
Right?
You're refilling.
It's not like the med pen where you're spearing yourself.
It's an animation problem. It's an animation problem.
Yeah, exactly. They use the same animation.
Into your leg or your arm.
That's one thing I've been hoping for is that you will have ports built into your suit or your armor.
Oh, you just
this is a port for medication. This is a port for restoring your oxygen supply.
I think that'll come down to the simple fact that this is a game and they've already got animations. And I know that they add animations all the time. I think that is probably the least necessary animation, right? I mean, it works well. I mean,
Does it though?
it's
Oh, that's right.
It's
Somebody brought
really
up liquid
old.
oxygen. Tree. You remember The Abyss? You watched The Abyss?
Oh yeah.
Where he puts on the mask and he fills it up with water, and it's actually like a way for him to breathe longer. And not only that, but not
Barotrauma
face like the
spotted.
pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
all
Anyway,
right. So let's get back on topic here. Right.
So
okay.
we talked about fire and why fire is so important, and then
We
hull
talked about
integrity
hull
is
integrity.
is
How
up
easy
there.
is it for you to do something outside the ship?
and a submarine.
Well, I mean, do you have to surface every time, or do you have water locks that you could send a diver out at certain depths to go do something, or to do something? Like if you're in a wartime environment, you don't want to surface completely. Is there a means to get someone outside of the ship?
Sure is.
Or yes,
Yeah.
okay,
Yes. Well, we have what they call lockout chambers, and you guys can research it. There's videos on it. Specifically, there are a few submarines that are equipped with those lockout chambers, and then not only that, but like diver recovery, dedicated. I'm trying to think where I want to stray with this. Service trunks, where you can deploy and recover special operations forces and or divers at certain depths. You're right, it's depth limited, because ultimately, right, you get too deep and it's a non-zero game on that one.
of course.
So that does exist. I don't know how. I mean, obviously you can relate it to Star Citizen and what we have now with how easy it is to
Walk out of
EVA.
your ship. Yeah.
But I imagine they're going to bring depth to that system once they kind of get real about the whole. And you kind of seen it. I don't know if you guys have noticed, even in 317, if you go into an airlock sometimes on a planet with like relatively low atmosphere or close to vacuum, and you try and cycle the airlock with the door still open, it'll eject you. Like
You can cycle an airlock with the door open?
I've
I thought
noticed
it
some of these, like,
automatically
a little
closed it
lag.
and then it rotates. Doesn't it?
I think some of the little structures on planets sometimes will try and cycle with one of the doors still open, and it'll eject you. You see it too with trying to go into a ship with an open hangar, and you'll like run into the ship, and as soon as you get to the point where you think pretty much like atmosphere is present, it like shoots you backwards. You guys not had that?
Never experienced that.
No, I mean,
Oh my god, I got video of it.
Hey,
It's
go
like
check out
that's-
Night Cob's YouTube channel.
No, I don't think. I mean, like, I don't think I've actually put the video of it on YouTube, but
Coming
I've seen it.
soon.
Anyway, you'll have to trust me. But I mean, like, that's the idea: is you need that moment of explosive decompression to really drive home that you need to establish slowly a pressure difference when you're transitioning to vacuum, ideally to deploy somebody. Because bottom line is, like, lockout chambers and everything, airlocks, they all function on the same purpose. It's like, I'm going to slowly, change the environment so that when I open the door on the other side, there's not a gross pressure differential that will immediately shoot you out into space uncontrolled, or potentially injure you. And we have that problem actually internally on submarines sometimes, where it's like you have hatches that separate compartments. And if there's a pressure differential between the compartment and you don't equalize that pressure differential, it doesn't actually take much. 4 or 5 pounds, and you open a door, and you might be shooting through that door, as a adult human being, and only 4 or 5 pounds of pressure difference. Because when you take that 5 pounds and you magnify it across an entire compartment, like, it's a big deal. So
yeah.
There you go.
like that has to become, and I think it will be. I think obviously you see the videos of like how they now do life support and transition pressure, temperature and stuff. You open a door in one space, it obviously, that atmosphere in the one room transitions into the next at a reasonable rate based on the volume of the two spaces. They're obviously taking these things into account. So ultimately, I think what you are going to see is, you want to deploy forces into space, you better have an airlock that cycles. Otherwise, you're about to eject them into space and
Which might be good.
execute. It might be good,
If
or
they
it
can
might.
stop.
Yeah, if they can stop.
So that
So-
that goes
Um,
back to is the pressure differential managed via the life support, or is
I
there
think
another
that's-
system on board?
within an airlock or just in rooms?
Well, you were talking about rooms on a submarine can have slightly different pressure differential
Yep.
that can ruin your day if you're not aware of it. So, not that I think CIG is going to give us that type of shenaniganry.
No,
but,
I don't expect that to be a thing internal to the ship
But
as a
is that
causality.
just for people, who may or may not have an interest in this? Is it a life support function, or is it some other system function?
So ultimately it boils. I mean, if you couple systems like ventilation, which in some cases is life support, and in some cases is more akin to equipment support.
Okay.
Things like ventilation and some supporting systems for life support are ultimately, yes, how you balance the
It's
equation.
all one system of systems that have to balance to equalize pressure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the problem is that difference in pressure is a causality of like sometimes normal ship operations. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here. Ultimately, right, if you generate atmosphere in an environment and you have other things like, high pressure air reserves is a big thing in a submarine because high pressure air, you feed into high pressure hydraulics as a mode of pressure and force and movement of a pressurized liquid and stuff like that. So it can operate hydraulically operated control surfaces and everything like that. Well, you have to get that high pressure air from somewhere. So you have to take suction. You can't take suction externally. There's no immediate air volume outside of a submarine when you're submerged. So you have to take it internally. Now I'm drawing a vacuum in whatever space I'm taking a suction on. It's a slow vacuum. And it's something that I will occasionally have to equalize pressure across compartments. So there's things you do to mitigate these things. But I mean, that's outside the scope of what Star Citizen is going
There
to do.
you go, CIG. This is it.
So getting back to the priorities, we talked about why fire is, in general, number one. And close second to that is hull integrity. Regarding the ones that we came up with afterwards, restoring power, restoring life support, restoring other ship functions, where would you've put out the fire, and
Power's next.
the power, restoring power to now. Let's say your ship is without power. Are you don't have your power plant up, but you're running on battery backups. Is your priority still getting the power plant back up and running, even though you have backup
Yes.
power? Yeah.
Yes, because backup power is not sustainable long term.
Yeah.
And in most scenarios, and if they do this the right way, in my opinion, right, in most scenarios, you're very limited on that reserve. And the idea is, so I'll give you guys the acronym that we use in engineering on a submarine.
We love acronyms. We all three of us love acronyms.
Simple one. So it's our list of priorities in terms of casualty response with regards to engineering related casualties, and it's PIFA. Now, I'm going to kill the first one because I don't think it matters as much in space as it does for a submarine, because like we kind of talked about this pre-stream, but propulsion is necessary on a submarine, because if you don't have propulsion, you're sinking. So if you don't have propulsion, you're just dead. You will sink out, you'll reach crush depth, and you'll be dead. So propulsion is actually the first thing that we care about in terms of restoration of priorities. But the immediate next one, E, is electrical power. Because if I don't have electrical power, I can't actually continue down the chain of priorities. But ultimately, the two following it, their feed and air conditioning, honestly, you don't need to worry about those. Essentially, those are supporting loads. And we can go into like the idea of like life support and stuff like that beyond that.
Well, especially because if you're in a ship,
feed and what?
Air conditioning.
So that's feeding air?
No, feed is something different, but I can't talk about what it means.
well, no, but you bring up a point though. If you have a ship with multiple power plants, and okay, one is completely gone, the other one is salvageable, you can get it back up and running, and then okay, you've restored partial power to the ship, and then you're having to manage what things to bring back online in order to not overwhelm your power plant, that you have left.
Yeah.
That's a very realistic scenario that we could be talking about, because that can happen.
This is
I'll give you
why
the
I think
substitute for feed because I know it's going to bother a tier real bad, and
it
you and I
is.
can talk offline later.
Yes.
The substitute would be equivalent in a Star Citizen world would be, okay, I need power back. Immediately following that, I need cooling, but I need power to operate my coolers.
Hmm.
So I don't get one
Okay.
without the other. So power comes back first, and then coolers come back second. Following that, and I used air conditioning, and the only reason that I say air conditioning, a lot of people be like, that doesn't seem like a really prioritized load. Why is that even in your list? Bottom line is all that would kind of fall in the Star Citizen equivalent of a cooler. Every piece of equipment, electrical equipment, generates heat, and if it generates too much heat, it stops working appropriately. It melts, resistors, conductors, everything start to fail. Or if humidity just gets too high in a space, right? Then moisture forms, condensation, and water does not react well with electronics.
People also don't react well.
Exactly. And that would be the other part of that. So bottom line is really it boils down to electrical power, cooling for said electrical power, and then life support systems would be
Okay.
my list of priorities in Star Citizen.
So you're in Star Citizen, your power plant, you said your power plant, your so restoring
Coolers.
your power plant and then making sure your coolers are up and functioning, and then
Yep.
life support following that.
Yeah.
And then if you let's say you are we're in an Idris, and we all should be fairly familiar with, not really the layout, but the various functions of the Idris. You've restored you restored power and your ability to, your coolers, in this instance, and life support. Where are you routing power to first? If you have had interruptions within your power grid, your relay system, what areas of the ship do you want to make sure have power first and foremost? For you on a submarine, what would that look like, and how do we apply that to a ship in Star Citizen?
Propulsion systems.
Propulsion. Okay, so getting
because bottom
your
line is you can't. Yeah, if you
Mhm.
can move, if you can get somewhere to either receive help or get yourself out of a bad situation, right? Like I use the idea of, okay, I've got these three things back. I can continue to fight whatever other casualties develop. My main concern would be, can I move the ship out of harm's way if I need to? If I can't,
Can I get into quantum?
that
Can
would
I?
be, and that's kind of falls
Yeah.
in with propulsion. But I mean, you may need just be like, can I get basic engine power to keep myself from careening into the asteroid that I'm, nearby?
Mhm.
Or if you're falling out of orbit and you're getting ready to crash into the planet, that's a whole other thing,
we know that's
maybe
definitely
you're
a thing in Star Citizen too. That's
exactly.
one of Paul
So,
Astropub's favorite things is talking
so that's
about
when I divert to propulsion.
yeah. Okay, so
This is
Get
also,
power back to the engines.
but this is also why, if I can pause, this is why
Go for it.
I think the Carrack is gonna continually be the go-to ship for exploration versus the new one, and I can never remember what the new one's called.
The
What is
Odyssey.
it? The Odyssey, because the Odyssey has a capital class power plant, which requires, they've said, basically dry dock to replace.
Yep.
Whereas
you can
level 1, 2s, and 3s you can replace internally if you have one.
Mhm.
So if you're going out into the black for a protracted period of time, you can put a couple of extra power plants in your hold and then take them to engineering if you get yourself in trouble,
Yeah.
and replace
Yeah.
them, and
If
probably use.
if it goes that badly, you can full on
Yeah,
replace
if it
it
goes
versus
that
just
badly, you can
replacing
replace the
subcomponents.
car,
Mhm.
right? And whereas you're not going to be able to do that with that capital class exploration ship.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
But that applies to your, people talk about how Oh well, I have an Idris, I have a Javelin. The whole
Oh, it applies to all of them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
any
Any
capital class ship, that's you have more power, but that's also a vulnerability because
It is.
some of them have some, and I can never remember what has what, but if you don't have significant redundancy, you could be up a creek without a paddle. And Night
Yep.
Cobb could be just an absolute wizard engineer, but if your power plant is toast to toast, you can't get it back up and running, you're really in a bad way. But I like how you were talking about how getting power back to propulsion first and foremost, because that's a if we're using our Idris analogy, the Idris has the multiple thrusters mounted on the side, and you're going to you have to, those ships are going to have, power conduits, however, it ends up working, the relay system, um, in order to get power to those thrusters. That it's not like the power plant is right next to the engine, which is right in front of the thrusters,
Yeah.
which is actually, like you were talking about, a tier, an advantage kind of something like the Carrack. The main thrusters are directly behind engineering. So you don't have this pathway to your main thrusters to get them back going. It's a very short distance, from your power plant to get power back to those main thrusters. Maneuvering,
just don't crawl into that crawl space because it will eject you into space.
yeah, right where the thrusters are, melt. Um, but yeah,
No,
that's something that.
there's a gap in the mesh right now, and
Okay.
the power plant doesn't fill the whole area, and so if you crawl into there, it'll just poop you out the back.
But that's a ship design thing where you
Yeah.
you may have some serious challenges getting power rerouted back to those thrusters that are a distance away from wherever your power plants are, in order to restore propulsion and maneuverability, because it propulsion, like you said, but also you have all sorts of maneuvering thrusters all over the ship. And so you could have, based off of how challenging it is to restore power to various areas, you may have a significant challenge restoring maneuverability. You may be able to just, only have two lateral thrusters and go left and right and have very little otherwise attitude control, but at least you can go in a straight line and maybe get away, or try and get away, put some distance between you and whatever the threat is. But that's something that's really interesting to think about. Um, so we have talked about restoring power and getting power back to your propulsion and maneuvering systems. Um, and then where would you go from that? You talked about life support and other ship functions. What would come after restoring power? Are you going to try, get shields back up and running? Weapons. What other things do we have?
So that boils down to how deep they go. Right now, like, functionally, the only thing that you really lose, in certain distortion events is, okay, like you said, engines, thrusters, shields, and weapon emplacements. But the things that I would be ultimately concerned with, and I know they have physicalized components for on some ships, are, okay, navigation system
Mm-hmm.
and radar.
Because you got to be able to see where you're
in
going.
my mind, these things come before shields and weapons. And don't get me wrong, like, obviously there might be a little bit. I think beyond propulsion, it gets a little bit more, choose your fate based on the circumstances that you're in, and it might dictate your priorities, and that's fine. That's totally fine if that's how it works at that particular point in time. But I think you need those bare minimums before you actually start addressing things like shields and weapons are going to be one of the last things on my list, depending on the situation. If I'm in combat, yes, but ultimately, how effective in combat are you if you don't have navigation systems, targeting systems online? The basic necessities of your flight control systems, if they don't exist, they aren't functioning, they don't have power, then you are essentially a free-floating target. Maybe you've got propulsion and you've got a little bit of movement on your side, but now you're a moving target, but you're not effective in combat. So it's the support systems, and ultimately you end with, okay, now I'm ready to re-engage shields, and then weapons would be my last thing. If you're that hurt and you're in casualty damage mode, you're not good in a fight. Your first priority should be getting out of the way of the fight, in my opinion. You guys are the combat experts, though.
No,
So
that's really logical, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because that would not have been my first thought, and it's like, it's the same thing,
And that's not necessarily a ground pounder perspective either.
yeah,
Like I
from a
can
ground,
understand if you're in a ship formation and you can't move and you get power back, you would want to clear the fight so that
Yeah,
your larger fleet could continue to maneuver. Because right now you're just a navigation hazard.
yeah,
exactly.
Whereas,
You're a risk to yourself and everyone else.
hmm
yeah. Whereas for
you don't
a
want to
ground
fly your
pounder,
Idris into the line of fire of your javelin, who's trying to take out, whoever has been attacking you. Yeah,
yeah, that's a different perspective, I think,
that's actually,
what I would take. But that makes sense.
yeah, no, I really like that. It's a really good point. It's just kind of funny because it I didn't immediately think about that, but the game that I've been playing that, came up in my episode description before I changed it because I'm a moron. Um, I do that all the time in that game. Is if there's a disabled ship, like an enemy ship, I will use that Hulk as cover for my ship, and maneuver
Yeah.
around it in order to fire, and then go back in there. Vent, in this game they call it flux, but essentially, you know, uh, that's if you're a navigation hazard, that's something that, if you bump into another ship, you can cause significant damage to your friendlies. You can interrupt their line of fire. You totally throw a giant, you're a giant monkey wrench in the plan.
Yeah, you're a liability at that point in time.
Yeah, and it's it's kind of like casualty evacuation on the ground, in that we need to get them out of the way and out of the rear because they're a distraction. They're not combat effective. You're bleeding out on the floor, and we can't have you sitting up there with the rest of the guys who are still in the fight screaming bloody murder because you're a distraction. And yeah, you might be a hazard, like if you're in a hallway, of people trying to get past you. But that's one of the
Yep.
main things as a medic for me is, go get, once we have superior, fire superiority, go in there and get them and pull them back out of the fight, get them, into cover, so that way, for those reasons. But I wouldn't have immediately applied that logic, even though I do that in game a lot, but it makes a lot of sense. So we talked about fire, hull integrity, restoring power, maneuverability, and then navigation, and you said like sensors or visibility, so you can see where you're going, because you can't always rely on just the your screen, your window in front of you.
You're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to jump away and clear the fight
Yep.
if you can't, if you don't have sensors. So
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. You're going to have
Yeah.
to be able to plot some sort of course, whether it's, if you're relating it to the, the new master modes, whether you're under standard power or quantum travel, one way or another, you have to have some sort of ability to do that. And you said that weapons and shields, is really the last priority. Hopefully your armor holds, and people, the people that are shooting you aren't trying to finish you off. But at the same time, if they're trying to finish you off in a larger battle, that's wasted firepower. If you can't fight
It is.
back, they should be targeting the other ships. Not trying to. Now, if you're the only target, well, then that sucks.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of
Yep.
sense too. I think that sort of covers the priorities, and we talked about a lot about the tasks within those different priorities of what you would need to do in order to achieve those goals, those priorities.
Ooh.
So from a sort of from a Navy perspective, and I always think about this because I remember, witnessing the ships going to battle stations when I was on board, and watching the different teams going about doing their different things. And how do you, what's the process going into that of deciding who does what, and making sure that they know how to do that job and have the equipment to do that job. How does that go? In your experience, being on a sub, you can sort of extrapolate that to a bigger picture, bigger ship, and into Star Citizen.
Well, so first and foremost, everybody's trained and qualified. damage control. It's part of your basic quals. So you go through a basic qualification, and then you'll go through a more advanced qualification. In order to actually wear my warfare device, the submarine dolphins, I actually have to have achieved high levels of damage control qualification, amongst a general working knowledge of all the ship systems. And that usually takes about a year, based on the complexity of those systems and the training associated with the damage control. So there's that. So that's why I say, like, ultimately on the smaller ships, you're going to want, I mean, like, the really sweaty, high running crews are going to be all trained in damage control. They're all going to know how to use a fire extinguisher. They're all going to know how to do basic things like how do you vent the compartment, to either one, restore atmosphere, or B, get rid of it quickly, in pre-combat situations and stuff like that. And, ultimately it's a training piece at the beginning. Now, as to who goes where and does what when the actual casualty happens, we have things called watch quarter station bills. And it basically is these posted watch bills of, in the event of X casualty, these are the responsibilities. Now they're broken down, and this isn't going to be probably how Star Citizen works, but they're broken down by, okay, are you the oncoming, offgoing, or you're the actual watchstander? These are your responsibilities. So if I'm, it's my turn, based on like a 3-shift period day, if it's my turn to be, pilot, if I'm off-going pilot, then my responsibility is, potentially, you're the man in charge at the scene. If there's a fire in a space, you're the man in charge. So you're directing and coordinating all casualty efforts at the scene. But maybe the oncoming guy who is in the rack, sleepier, a little bit harder to wake up and get to the scene, he might take on a responsibility that that is afforded a little more time to get on station. So maybe he's like, a good example for us would be second hose team. He's the second full FFE, full gear for fighting a fire, a Scott SCBA on their back and all that kind of stuff. Takes time to dress out. You're the second team to go in. So you're the backup team, or something along those lines. Yeah. Yep, so there's a watch quarter station bill that basically designates what everybody's responsibilities would be. Now in Star Citizen, I would just expect it to be, because I do not expect crew rotations and shifts and stuff like that. You just need to have that identified of, okay, gunners, your priority is to get off the turrets and go grab fire extinguishers, and you're going to have to decide who the best persons for the job and the people that you can sacrifice from whatever their normal positions are to go fight. And me in my head, I say, because like we said, right, if you're into the major casualties, weapons are no longer your priority. Like, hopefully, they've disengaged from you because you're not a threat anymore. And it's a matter of you're just trying to save the ship. So gunners are coming off turrets.
Let me interrupt you. Is that how you... Yeah. So if you can elaborate on that, as far as the triaging, you're reverse triaging the ship's systems, and teams based off of, hey, we have like you say, casualties, not people casualties, but casualties as far as the ship, and you're reverse triaging people from different tasks based off of, hey, this isn't as important right now. We need you to do this damage control role. So if you can elaborate on that, you talked about weapons, but what would that sort of list look like, going down from who are the first people that you would pull off their normal job? You've got weapons. Where do you go from there as far as like a ship role?
So just to be clear, I mean, like, depends on the nature of your crew too and what your complement is. But like, I mean, obviously you've got some other options too prior to weapons. Maybe if it's mid combat and it's just a matter of addressing battle damage. Hopefully, ideally, the end world we all want to live in is, okay, I don't have every single person on my ship in a turret, in a pilot or co-pilot seat, or even in the captain's chair. I have some additional people that are like onboard security in case I get boarded, or these are the troops that I brought on board my Valkyrie that I'm getting ready to disposition to a hostile area. Well, guess what, guys? You're on the line now. Because ultimately I keep people in the stations of active crew members as long as I can until I have to pull from them. And then the triage becomes, weapons, engineers, easy, but I would immediately task them in any casualty scenario as you're the man in charge. Like, I don't want you actively picking up a fire extinguisher unless you have to. You are to direct and coordinate damage control efforts. And, maybe you can operate the terminals, adjust atmospheres and stuff like that. But ultimately, you might have to multitask a little bit there, but I don't want you being the person attacking the fire. Because if I lose the engineer to the fire, compounded my problems. Like, that was a crucial crew member in that scenario. And then the last person I'd probably pull from co-pilot's easy to pull out. Co-pilot would be next on my list too, with the gunners. Because most ships are only going to need the one pilot to fly. Pilot's probably going to sit there last with the captain. Those are going to be the last two that get pulled off station. And really, I pull the pilot only if he's lost all engines, all capability of controlling the craft. In which case, it's like, well, you're not doing any good in that chair, so get up and go fight.
I like it.
So that would be my mentality with the triage. Now, again, like I work in an environment where on the sub, the last people they're going to come off. Well, let me restate this: the first people they're going to react are actually watchstanders, because your offgoing watchstanders and your oncoming watchstanders are doing something. They're not in the space. They're not walking around paying attention to their equipment. So when their equipment catches on fire, right, the very first people are going to be the people in that space that are managing the equipment, and they're going to be the ones that attack. But that's a short-term thing, and they have to get relieved because they have to go back to operating the equipment, assuming it hasn't been lost. So there's a quick and immediate transition from that initial response to subsequent response. And that subsequent response should be handled by off-going awake people, that just got off watch. They're eating their meal, they're watching their movies in the rack, or they're doing maintenance, and stuff like that, non-watch standing functions. And then ultimately they will get relieved longer term by oncoming watchstanders. But that's not something we're not going to, if the day comes when we are talking about shift rotations and watch sections and stuff like that with manning your Idris and your Javelin, because persistence is a thing, man, I got it. I got this job already. I don't need it. I don't need it in my off time.
So I was going to say, you might be able to do that level of fidelity with your
NPCs.
With your
NPCs.
Yeah,
you might.
That was my thought too.
I know people have varying opinions on how effective they think NPCs will be, but at a minimum, assigning priorities, so that they rotate. They may or may not. You give them priorities, right? So it's just like Pulsar. You have like a huge laundry list of things you can prioritize for your NPC crew to do things. So
we talked about that briefly when we did the NPC crew asset or liability part, because you can, for those that, like Night God was saying, the sort of more simplistic functions, putting out fire, venting a room or restoring atmosphere to a room, those sorts of things. I always liken it to, I hope that having NPC crew on a larger ship, it ends up, you have some sort of system kind of like you do for colony sims, where you have, your NPCs have different traits that, their strengths, and weaknesses, what things that they're skilled at, things that they're not skilled at. And then you can prioritize them to do certain things throughout their day, based off of those traits and what you need done. And having that sort of system where, okay, in the event of X, you set this condition, and then your NPCs react to it based off of their priorities that you've given to them. And you can have them doing those more rudimentary tasks in order to keep your, as you were saying, your engineers, the higher priority people, your player characters, who know the strategy, know the systems. You can keep them unburdened with the things like putting out fires, or replacing a relay. Hey, we need this relay replaced. You go do it, and they run off and they go do it. You don't need a player doing that. You can have an NPC doing that. Those are.
Well, and I think that's going to be a good thing is like firefighting. If you're running 1 or 2 NPCs, firefighting is probably a perfect thing for them to do. The moment fire breaks out, they just stop doing what they're doing and they run over and they start doing it.
Yeah. That really depends on the fidelity of the AI.
Okay, well, that's always true. Yeah,
so I've seen their fire propagation like software. It's dynamic.
Yeah.
And
how many NPCs am I going to have to treat with burn injuries because they tried to put the fire out while standing in the fire?
Strategy. There's a strategy to firefighting, and it requires some level of training. It's not, don't get me wrong, I expect in Star Citizen it's going to be pretty much as easy as point a fucking fire extinguisher at a fire and hopefully it will go out. Or you vent the atmosphere, which I'm glad they're building that in because that's great. But, real life, it's all about coordinated attacking the base. The real interesting thing will be, right, is the biggest problem with fighting a fire once it grows to a certain point is you lose the ability to see. So you require thermal imaging units. We call them nifties, thermal imaging units. And basically you have a guy on the hose nozzle and then you have a guy behind him and he's the nifty operator, and the nifty operator coordinates the attack. Now, also the thing that they don't talk about with fires is not only that you can't see, it's incredibly loud. So you can't hear you either. So you have to coordinate through hand signals and touch. On like how to direct the attack. So you got one guy looking through a video screen, a thermal imaging screen, to find the base of the fire, and you got another guy right in front of him who's on the nozzle on the hose, and you have to basically coordinate through touch as if the guy on the hose is wearing a complete blindfold to actually point the hose in the right direction and attack. So that's a higher level of coordination than I point the thing at the fire and it goes out. Now, I don't know if you'll get to that point with Star Citizen. I highly suspect not, because they want to maintain the impressiveness of their visuals. But, they're going to be like, look at that fire burn. Isn't it pretty? Yeah, exactly. Look at that, guys. Gen 12. That's
no,
don't
work, put baby. It out. Just look at it for a minute. Just
just watch it for a hot minute. It'll be great. We worked really hard on that.
Watch it for a hot minute. But I'll be here all week.
That one actually was not intended, but yeah. So
those are the best puns.
That's true. But yeah, I worry though. I'm envisioning the future of AI crew members on low tick rate with fire extinguishers pointing it at the wall that's not on fire while the one behind them burns, and stuff like that. And it's just like, turn around, turn. God damn it. Did he take one of the only ones on the walls, guys? How many were there? How many fire extinguishers on board? All the NPCs have them, guys.
The fire has propagated into the next room, and he's squirting it on the already burned room.
Yeah. Wait till that moment when you're killing the NPC to take his fire extinguisher from him, and God forbid you pick it up and it's empty, and you're like, oh, do we have spares?
You now have a crime stat on your own ship from assaulting your own crew.
Your brother is always watching you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, only shoot your NPCs when you're in pyro.
Exactly. That'll be the interesting things though that happen with AI crew one day. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to theory craft too much, and I like talking about this in relation to the systems we have. I still stand by one of your best methods to fight a fire and keep it from growing out of control is going to be depressurize that space. You just have to accept the consequences that space is going to be in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
you have to have the ability to depressurize that space too, because if it's an internal compartment, you have to use your life support system to vent that space. You can't just open it to the exterior. You may if you wanted to do that, you might have to open up a whole bunch of doors between there and an airlock. And so that's a sweet. I'll just if you didn't vent, if you vented it beforehand, that's a great mitigation strategy. But if you didn't, then you could be up a creek without a paddle, by taking damage to your life support system. You don't have to knock it out, but if it doesn't have the power, to do what you need to do, or it slows down its ability, you could have, fire propagating, very quickly, especially, if you have,
as it does,
casualties in terms of people, who are unable to respond to that. So those are really good points. I very much
You-
appreciate it.
Real quick, you want to know where I think they're building the distinction, by the way, on this game? And they're advertising it in a very small way. And I don't know if they're doing it on purpose or if it's a subtle, like, kind of side effect, right? Those that are playing this game from the combat PvP oriented aspect are probably already thinking of things like, yeah, I'm gonna vent my ship and I'll be a vacuum and I'll have some oxy pens, and fire's not my problem because everybody's going to be in space gear and armor and things that are controlled internally. So I don't really give a shit about ship's atmosphere and life support nearly as much as other people do. But they've already talked about this. They've already talked about passenger missions, and the new ship from Crusader, the Spirit. Like, the executives and high value VIPs that get on board that ship, you're not going to be able to get them to wear a vac suit. That one, I don't think they're going to even program that for the AIs to do. They're just going to get on board your ship and they're going to want to sit in the nice plush chair and they're going to want to drink champagne and stuff like that. And if you get into combat, like, it's not like you're going to be able to tell that
Hey,
guy,
guys,
put on a
hang
vac
on, I'm
suit.
just gonna go do this bounty mission real quick. Just stand by. Ah!
But that's the idea. It's not even that, right? But like, the idea would be there should be a balance on the other side of that equation. Like, I want to be the pirate contract that has to go capture, a VIP off a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you got real concerns because, like, if you start a fire on that ship, that dude's gonna burn. Unless they've got good damage control and stuff like that. Or if you get attacked and you're doing an escort, and that's the idea, right? You pick up a high value VIP.
That is totally something that I see Ninetales doing, because when they first came onto the scene, and granted they went and broke a criminal out of jail just to kill him, but that was their job, their mission that they were doing was in order to get to that guy to put him down. They had to go get him out of of jail. But that's when it comes to all these organizations and stuff, high value targets and pirates going after them, especially if you're whether you're or pirates or mercenaries, you are take a mercenary job for one organization, and in order to ransom someone or weaken the competition, that's those are scenarios I totally expect to see in the verse, and to respond to.
That would be an interesting reverse bounty
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because it's basically
your bounty is the
player has a bounty to go kill a good guy NPC, right? Some corporate.
Yeah. Well, that's like kidnapping kind of thing. I think the kidnapping is the.
Wow. So it
They
would be
showed that reputation, little guy.
but then you happen to pick this guy up, and then that generates the mission, and then off
That'd be
you
cool.
go. And then
That'd be fun.
Unbeknownst to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it queues up a bounty or a kidnapping or whatever you want to call it for criminal players.
Why is this personnel transport mission rated as high risk and pay out so well? Oh, I'm going to do this. And, oh wait, it's because that person is, that's a tangent, but
to other people. But ultimately, my point is, right, they're building the function in of NPCs getting on ships, and ultimately, I know at first, it's not like you're going to be able to tell the NPC, my standard is when you get on board my vessel, you will be in combat armor and or a flight suit with a helmet at all times, because I don't believe in having atmosphere in flight. Like, you can't just say that to an NPC and just expect them to do that. They're going to just be on your ship, and if you want to escort them from one place to the other, you have now, just by default,
I paid for luxury accommodations and comfortable transport, and
it's just, I mean, like, even just the limitations of the code and the interaction that I expect, I just, like, you accept that you go to Orison to pick up 4 passengers, in whatever ship you took, and then you have to go somewhere. Bottom line is, whatever compartments they go into have to have atmosphere, because otherwise you're going to take off and, they die, and then it's like, well, that's a fail. Man, it's because I rigged for my standard, I don't want fire, so that's what I expect. I expect you're going to have a reason. And that's what I think players kind of get wrapped around, is like, well, why would I ever just use the life support system to supply oxygen? I fly in armor all the time,
You're not
and
going
it's
to be able
going
to fly in armor all the time, though.
Mm-hmm.
granted.
Light armor is probably the most you'll ever be able to fly routinely, and I think
Yeah.
they've talked about even that
You'll
having
have
some type
reasons for not wearing an armor
Yeah.
and a full suit. I'm um, a lot of sci-fi franchises talk about having like a little mask that you wear, and an emergency mask with an emergency air canister that you can wear long, hook it onto your face, and you can wear that long enough in order to get to where the suit storage is.
Yeah.
Well,
Is there
Atira, I know we've
anything
been.
else you? No, what's up? I was going
Oh,
to
I was
ask
gonna
him if
say.
there's anything else he wants to say about damage control.
Oh yeah, and then I was going to ask you if you had
Words of
anything you wanted to
wisdom.
add.
I'll offer this. Most damage control is heavily relied upon somebody taking charge of the effort and coordinating the attack. And then there's a communication piece of that person to the ship control party. So in this case, I would say the captain and the pilot being the key players that need to be aware of whatever damage control efforts, what efforts are in progress, what actions have been taken, what actions need to be taken, and then also crucially, what systems are compromised and or returned.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not just that the man in charge is down there like, okay, you do this, you do that, you do this, and stuff like that. They have to have their own list of priorities in their head. Like I said, they've got to know, okay, I need electrical power back, I need cooling, and then I need life support, and then I got to get the pilot and the co-pilot, or ensure. Maybe it's just ensuring, or maximizing. I got to maximize propulsion for the ship. Restore as many thrusters as I can achieve, or maybe it's, all right, let's start with the mains, then the retros, and then it's maneuvering. I can go forward or I can stop. I can kill flight, and then it's, maneuvering thrusters in a controlled fashion. And they have to have that priority list down, and they have to communicate what they need and or what they're providing to the captain and the pilot. And most casualties live or die based on that communication between the man in charge at the scene and the ship control party. So if you've got a good engineer, I would make sure that they're trained and they're ready to step up, take charge, and make sure you don't have a bunch of chiefs. You got a few Indians that are just ready to take orders and do what the engineer says, because the engineer should know best. And a good captain and or pilot that can also coordinate with that person to communicate maybe there is a change in priority based on the condition of the ship.
Yeah, the Captain Kirk asking Scotty what's possible, what can we do, what are our options.
Yep.
And I don't want to go into it because we could theory craft about it, but it just you bringing that up, it makes me very curious about how they will go about displaying ship status, in regards to damage control, for the engineer, the person who is leading your damage control efforts. Being able to visualize those things for them to do their job with what they've built for building blocks. I think that could, I look forward to seeing that screenshot of those systems and how they display it in order for, the wannabe Scotties of the Star Citizen verse to be able to do what you're talking about, because it's not going to be something, simplistic and bland. It's going to be a, multifaceted system that looks just incredibly epic. And so I'm looking forward to that.
We hope.
Before
Me too.
Yeah, I do too. We're just past the 2-hour mark, and this second segment, Atira and I have been asking Night Cobb questions, and we've been feeding off of what he, the advice and the experience that he has. I don't have anything to add. Atira, if you had anything else you wanted to add from your experience, as a tanker or an officer being in a leadership position, feel free. But otherwise, I think this has been a really productive discussion on both topics. Been very interesting and illuminating.
I think our esteemed non-commissioned officer, senior non-commissioned officer, has covered everything.
Yeah, gunning for promotion. Yep, I like it.
Working on it.
It's gonna happen. We're pulling for
I just
you.
want to become my favorite Halo character. That's all.
Well, yeah. Gosh,
Yeah.
I've seen some Master Chiefs out there that do not do your favorite Halo character any favors.
You're not
But-
wrong. Well, I'm not much better. The saying in the Navy is senior chiefs are the least trustworthy because they're even numbered, and you're the only even numbered style of chief because you're E8 instead of E7 or 9.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get trustworthy again.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. We could take you
sense.
the other way too.
No.
Shady AF.
He's like, no.
No.
No, I'm good.
Forward progression.
It's been very interesting listening to Night Cobb preach to us on damage control.
Mhm.
I appreciate. I walked away with some great terminology. Fatal funnel. I remembered it that time.
I know
did.
all about like damage control surgery, and that's a thing. But
Oh man, I meant to
you know,
tell
we,
you,
we
Tree.
do things that are similar.
You put a bug in my head. I fly a lot. I travel.
I do too,
My
unfortunately.
current shore duty. Well, you were talking about, to say the least, flight paramedic. Yeah. But you were talking
getting
about
to work. I live in Idaho,
You're
but I
talking about-
work in New Mexico. So
Oh, gotcha. But you were talking the other day on one of your streams about the natures of being a paramedic in flight and like the whole different environment that brings with regards to, were you talking about air embolisms or what were you talking about? It had to do with air density.
Mhm.
Air density.
Yeah.
And I was
people do
listening
not,
to that and I was, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
sick people do not do well with significant changes in altitude and air density. It's a huge thing. Where I work, my base is at like 3,500 feet, but to go to Albuquerque or El Paso, we generally have to fly over 8,000 feet, sometimes higher, if we've got like mountain obscuration. That's a huge
Yeah.
change in air density, and for people who are struggling to maintain oxygenation, it presents a significant challenge. And you're like, oh well, you can just give them more oxygen. I can only carry so much oxygen on my aircraft, and I've got an hour and a half long flight time. These are logistical challenges that most people don't think about. Because they're like, oh, just you throw them in the ambulance and you be at the hospital in 5 minutes. It doesn't work like that in much of the world, and that's entirely what my job is. And Star Citizen is recreating that, whether people are aware of it or not. But that's another topic for another day, and I'm actually going to do that video eventually. But this has also been fun and productive because boarding actions is going to be my next short form video. It got voted on by my YouTube community as the next one that they wanted to see me do a video on following the next great capital ship. So this discussion has been very productive and helpful, and I've taken my own notes. But yeah, if you guys don't have anything else, I think this is a good spot to wrap it up, especially because we're right at about 2 hours and 15 minutes, and each section is really just about 2 hours. So that's what we're going for. We haven't had an episode in a while, and look at us. We stayed on track. We stayed on time.
No.
We're professionals.
I'm just really
whether we want to
upset,
admit
Tree,
it or
because I
not.
didn't get to pick on a tier very much.
We've been doing that.
Man.
We've been doing that
Jeez.
offline a lot, though.
You think it'll stop me? I will kick you when you're down.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Brutal.
every predator goes for the
He's
weak
sick.
prey. You don't want to attack the. Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
He looks great though. I like
yeah,
the glasses.
you do look
He's
very
got
intelligent.
He's
Blue
got
light.
his nerd shirt on too.
It's blue light filtration there.
Mhm.
Got a big monitor
so you-
in front of me.
And yeah, that's so he can go to sleep later easily.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, got to get in bed.
For everybody who's hanging out with us in chat, and I'm
You're gonna raid
going to
somebody,
butcher the
right?
name again. We are going to raid somebody. I actually need to pull
Yeah.
that up, but I forget the name of the guy from your org who's hanging out with us. I just want to say thank you for reminding me to change over the
True.
change over the episode information. I wish I had done that sooner. We probably would have had more people hanging out, but that's okay. But again, for all of you guys who've been...
pilot in that mildly successful YouTube video where he was running the Corsair through the snake pit.
Oh, nice. I'll have to check that out.
That was Drew.
I have not posted my own yet.
Drew, if I don't know if you saw, but you got some positive comments on your piloting skills for that.
And the rest of us just crashed and were just idiots.
Yeah, Tira didn't get any positive comments because everybody knows that he was flying the Pisces that exploded to my right.
It was
halfway
so
down
bad.
the track. Yeah,
the racing videos are going to be epic. It's going to be like watching the highlight reel of all the crashes in
I can't wait.
NASCAR. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you're still hanging out with us in chat or you've been with us, I want to say thank you for hanging out with us. And if you caught the ads, I appreciate you suffering through them because that helps support stackup.org. Again, all my content, all monetization goes towards supporting stackup.org. So if you, I appreciate the follows. If you choose to subscribe, we really appreciate that. If you want to donate directly, you can do that on Twitch. And then if you're watching this later on YouTube, again, please consider giving a like and a subscribe, leaving a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are on what we've been talking about. We want to hear them. I read and every comment and I respond to most of them. Nightcob and Atira, check out the comment section as well.
That's a lie. We read the comments for him. He can't read. Don't lie, people.
Well, I mean, that's why we have Discord.
Not reading those. We read them for him. It's fine.
Yes. If you want to chat with us directly, you can hop in my Discord. We're always in there chatting and stuff. We've got a special section for this podcast to talk about the episodes. And if you have suggestions of things you'd like us to talk about and cover in the future, let us know. Hop in my Discord, or you can leave a comment in the comments. And check out these guys. They have their own content. All the links are going to be in the description below, and you can check them out. I just want to say thanks, and thanks guys for making this work. We have very interesting schedules, and so finding the time to chat for 2 hours is a challenge, but I really appreciate it, and I always enjoy these. Hopefully we can make a game night work maybe on Saturday or something like that, or coming up, where we can all hop in together and have some in-game shenanigans and not have to, do big brain stuff like talk about boarding and damage control and, just go pew pew or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I'm down.
I am too. Yeah. I'm around this weekend.
Sweet. We'll plan on it, and then we'll discuss a time. I'll put out an event notice and we'll go forth and conquer. But that's all we have for this evening. And thanks again, everybody. 07. Have a good night.